What does the end of the world look like? Is it a sound? Is it a moment? In 331 BC, it was a cloud of dust on a flat, empty plain. On one side, the largest army the world had ever seen. On the other, him. This isn't just a battle. It's the final, personal, bloody showdown between two men for control of the known world. This is Alexander versus Darius. This is Gaugamela. The year is 331 BC, and the world holds its breath. 2 years earlier, at the Battle of Issus, the young, arrogant king of Macedon, Alexander, had shattered the Persian army and forced its king, Darius III, to flee the field, leaving his own mother and wife behind. Since then, Alexander had been on a rampage, conquering the entire Mediterranean coast, from Syria to Egypt, where he was declared a literal god, the son of Amun. Darius, humiliated but not broken, had sent Alexander a stunning offer: half of the entire Persian Empire, his daughter's hand in marriage, and a fortune in gold. In one of history's most telling moments, Alexander's most trusted general, Parmenion, reviewed the offer and said, "If I were Alexander, I would accept." Alexander famously replied, "So would I, if I were Parmenion. But I am Alexander." He refused. For Alexander, this was never about half the world. It was about all of it. Now, after 2 years of rebuilding, Darius was ready for his revenge. He had scoured his vast empire, from the Caspian Sea to the borders of India, and assembled a new, terrifying, and enormous army. He wasn't going to be caught in a narrow mountain pass like at Issus. He had learned his lesson. He had handpicked the battlefield, a wide, flat, open plain near the village of Gaugamela in modern-day Iraq. He had even ordered the ground to be leveled, a perfect, flat-killing floor, specifically designed for his greatest weapon. He had the numbers, he had the terrain, and he had the desperation of a king fighting for his very existence. This was the final showdown. The winner would not just take a throne, they would take the future. The sheer scale of what Alexander saw on that morning of October 1st is almost impossible to comprehend. The sources, as they often are hyperbolic, with some claiming Darius had over 1 million men. Modern historians are more conservative, but the most sober estimates still place the Persian army at over 100,000 men, and perhaps as many as 250,000. It was a human ocean, a polyglot mass of cavalry, infantry, and beasts. Darius had 15 war elephants from India, a terrifying psychological weapon. He had thousands of cavalry from the plains of Bactria and Scythia, considered the finest horsemen in the world. He had Greek mercenary hoplites, his own 10,000-man royal guard, the Immortals. And at the very front of his line, he had his trump card, 200 scythed chariots. These were tanks of the ancient world, heavy horse-drawn carts with razor-sharp blades, scythes extending from the wheels, designed to do one thing: slice the Macedonian phalanx to ribbons. Against this tidal wave, Alexander's army looked almost pathetic. He had 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. He was outnumbered conservatively at least 3 to 1, and perhaps as much as 5 to 1. But these were not just soldiers. They were the single deadliest military machine on earth. They were the veterans of Granicus and Issus, men who had followed their king from Greece to Egypt. They had the impenetrable Macedonian phalanx, a 16-man deep porcupine of 18-foot pikes called sarissas. And they had the surgical strike force, the 2,000-man companion cavalry, the hammer to the phalanx's anvil, and at their head, riding his legendary horse Bucephalus, was Alexander himself. Darius's plan was simple: use his chariots to break the phalanx's spirit, then use his vast, superior cavalry numbers to envelop and crush the Macedonians from both sides. Alexander's plan was, as always, insane. Ignore the flanks, ignore the numbers, and punch a hole straight through the center to kill the king. It was a strategy of pure, focused decapitation. The night before the battle, the tension was unbearable. The Persian camp was a city of light and noise, the sound of 100,000 nervous men and animals echoing across the plain. Darius, terrified of a night attack, had ordered his entire army to stand to arms all night long. They were exhausted, nervous, and on edge before the battle even began. In the Macedonian camp, there was quiet. Alexander, in an act of supreme, almost divine confidence, went to his tent and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. His generals, terrified, had to wake him in the morning, asking if he knew the battle was about to begin. He emerged, calm, and put on his magnificent helmet. When Parmenion, ever the warrior, suggested a night attack to even the odds, Alexander refused with the legendary line, "I will not steal my victory." He wanted to win in broad daylight. He wanted the world to see. As the sun rose, the two armies deployed. The Persian line was so wide it stretched for over 2 miles, far outflanking Alexander's compact formation. And then Alexander did something that must have utterly baffled the Persian king. He began to march his entire army, not straight ahead, but diagonally to the right. He just kept moving, marching his men parallel to the Persian line, but also away from it. Darius was confused. What was he doing? Was he retreating? Was he trying to find different ground? In reality, Alexander was a genius. He was doing 2 things at once. First, he was drawing the Persian cavalry on the left wing further and further out, forcing them to chase him. Second, and more importantly, he was slowly but surely moving off the perfectly flat, leveled ground that Darius had prepared for his scythed chariots. This single oblique maneuver was already beginning to unravel Darius's entire strategy. Darius, seeing his enemies slipping away and his chariot ground becoming useless, panicked. He made his first mistake. He ordered Bessus, his commander on the left, to ride out and stop Alexander from moving any further right. A massive wing of Bactrian cavalry surged forward to attack Alexander's right flank. This is what Alexander was waiting for. He countercharged with his own cavalry, and a massive swirling horse battle erupted on the far right flank. Seeing the chaos, Darius made his second and fatal mistake. He unleashed his superweapon, the 200 scythed chariots. He ordered them to charge straight at the Macedonian phalanx. This was supposed to be the moment the battle was won. It was a disaster. Alexander had prepared for this. He had trained his men. As the chariots thundered down, the front ranks of the phalanx did something terrifyingly brave. They didn't stand firm. They opened. At the last second, the front line sidestepped, creating channels or mouse traps through the formation. The horses instinctively veered into these empty lanes. Now they were trapped inside the phalanx, surrounded on both sides by men with spears, while javelin throwers and archers who had been protected behind the main line picked off the horses and drivers. The chariots, which had no brakes and couldn't turn, either passed harmlessly through the formation or were brought down, their drivers killed. The Persian superweapon was a complete failure. And now, the moment. The one moment the entire battle hinged on, because Darius had ordered his left-wing cavalry to charge Alexander's right, and his center was now occupied with the failed chariot charge. A gap had opened in the Persian line. It was a tiny, fleeting, temporary weakness, right between the Persian left wing and their center. And Alexander, who had been watching for this with an eagle's eye, saw it. This was his chance. He immediately reformed his companion cavalry, which had been fighting on the flank, into his signature formation, the emballon, the wedge. He placed himself at the very tip, a single man pointing like a spearhead, and he aimed that spear not at the army, but at the man, at the golden royal chariot of Darius III. What followed was the most famous cavalry charge in history. It wasn't a broad, sweeping attack. It was a 2,000-man missile. with Alexander the Great at its point, smashing with pinpoint precision into the heart of the Persian army. They bypassed the main infantry and slammed directly into Darius's personal bodyguard, the Greek mercenaries and the immortals. This was a king fighting. The dust was thick, the noise was a deafening roar of screams, bronze on bronze and horses. Alexander was in the thick of it, throwing javelins, his spear shattering. The historian Arrian claims he hurled a spear that missed Darius but skewered his charioteer, who fell dead from the chariot. The Persians nearby, seeing the driver fall, thought the king was dead. They panicked, and then Darius himself, seeing the blood-streaked, terrifying, almost superhuman figure of Alexander cutting a path directly towards him, broke. His nerve shattered. For the second time in his life, the King of Kings turned his chariot and fled the field, galloping for his life. The psychological shattering was instantaneous. The center of the Persian army, seeing their king flee, dissolved. But the battle was far from over. On Alexander's left flank, his old general Parmenion was in desperate trouble. The powerful Persian right-wing cavalry, led by Mazaeus, had succeeded in their flanking maneuver. They had broken through the Macedonian line and were now rampaging through the Macedonian baggage camp and were threatening to envelop Parmenion's phalanx from behind. Parmenion sent a desperate, frantic messenger to Alexander. "We are being destroyed. Come back, save us." Alexander at this very moment was in hot pursuit of Darius. He was yards from the man he had crossed the world to destroy. He faced an agonizing choice: continue the chase, capture Darius, and end the war right now, or abandon his personal glory to save his army. This choice, more than the charge, is what made him Alexander the Great. He swore, frustrated, but he made the call. He stopped the pursuit. He wheeled his exhausted companion cavalry around and charged back into the fray, slamming into the victorious Persian cavalry from the rear. This countercharge saved Parmenion, solidified the victory, and sealed the fate of the Persian army. The Persian right wing, caught between Alexander's hammer and Parmenion's anvil, broke and fled. The rout was total. The field belonged to Alexander.
The field is ours!
The Battle of Gaugamela was not just a victory, it was an execution. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, which had dominated the known world for over 2 centuries, had been decapitated. Darius would never raise another army. He fled east, a king only in name, only to be betrayed and assassinated by his own satrap, Bessus. When Alexander finally found his rival's body, abandoned in a wagon, he famously covered it with his own cloak. He would hunt Bessus down and execute him for regicide, styling himself as the legitimate avenger of Darius. Alexander marched into Babylon, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The gates were thrown open, and he was hailed as the new King of Asia. He would go on to burn the Persian capital of Persepolis in a fit of drunken revenge. And then he just kept going, marching his men to the very edge of the known world, into the mountains of Afghanistan and the river valleys of India. Gaugamela was the hinge upon which the world turned. It was the end of the ancient East and the dawn of the new, vibrant and Greek-speaking Hellenistic Age, an age that would blend cultures and shape the destiny of the West and the Middle East for the next 1,000 years. It was all decided on that one flat, dusty plain by the courage of one army and the singular, terrifying genius of its king. The what-ifs of Gaugamela are staggering. What if Darius hadn't fled? What if Alexander had chased Darius instead of saving Parmenion? Who do you think was the real architect of the victory? Alexander's unmatched tactical genius, or Darius's critical failure of nerve at the decisive moment? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you want to follow Alexander's brutal, bloody, and fascinating journey to the ends of the earth, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and ring the notification bell. We've got a lot more ground to cover. Thanks for watching.